All right, welcome back. So last couple of videos we were working on these warehouse structures here and here, and now I'm moving on to what I talked about towards the end of that video. What am I going to do with this space kind of back in here in this loading dock area? And so what I think I'm going to do is a bit of a concrete pad. I'm going to start at the loading dock area and work its way this way. I've got a little section of titchy fence there, and that's about an inch away from the backdrop, so there's no shadows there. And that also allows me to put a little bit of, I don't know, brush or something behind there. Some little bits of greenery coming up to just give the illusion of some distance between what's going on here, and that building. Also hides the bottom there. I'm not exactly sure. I'm thinking about how I want to tie into this area here. If I have it come in as a little bit of a ramp and come down, not sure. And there will be another large warehouse. This is going to be the end of it, made from plaster, and it's going to go all along that track there. So a big long warehouse over on that side. As for the tracks themselves, I think I'm just going to use some yard mix, kind of dirty looking ballast, same thing on both of those tracks, get some weeds growing in there and stuff. And probably continue that same kind of thing, all the way down behind the tracks to over there where those non-rail served flats are behind the engine tracks over in the corner. So that's what we're going to be working on this week. I'm mostly going to focus on this concrete lot, if you will. All right, so thinking about that parking lot out of concrete that I want to make. I've been experimenting a little bit on the workbench, and so I've got some experiments here with making the concrete material. And this is the first thing I tried, and this is like a foam, very pliable craft foam. I think it's a 1 or 2 mil thick or something, and it actually does make nice asphalt if you paint this side of it. It takes paint well and does a decent job of replicating asphalt. So I was trying to do the same thing and make concrete. So I tried a few things, and I etched on all these examples. I've etched just a 1-inch grid in there to mimic the seams in the concrete. And in these 3, I actually painted them with the same medium gray to begin with, and then came over the top of it with various washes of that chalk paint that I've used before. And I actually used cocoon, which is a little bit yellowish of a color, versus the sandstone I used on the loading dock, just to kind of try something different. And this one, the water behaves really weird on the surface here. Like just straight acrylic paint or slightly thinned down, it takes it well. When you thin it down, it wants to bead up and pool up, and it just sort of behaves strangely. And then the whole thing kind of, curved on, got warped on me. And so, I don't know, that's probably not the direction I'm going to go. So then I went to just straight, regular foam, and these are ones I'd cut thin back when these were the 2 pieces that might have been supports for underneath the overpass that I ended up not using. So I just did the same thing, and I just cut the pattern on them. Same paint as over here, but this time with the regular insulation foam. And the only difference between these 2 things really is on this one I burnished the top of it with concrete, which is a technique I've seen, with cardboard. Use this piece of cardboard right here actually. And it's a technique I've seen Jason Jensen and some others do, where you just kind of go over the top with cardboard to kind of smooth it out. So this is the unsmooth and this is the smooth. And what I saw on the smooth is, the unsmooth was way too rough. Maybe in G scale or something that would work well, but in HO, that's way too rough. So that's not the right solution. So then I tried, okay, let me smooth it out. And then it took the wash, it took the wash better, but it brought out all the little brush strokes I had in the base gray. So I said, okay, what else can we do? So this one here was airbrushed to get rid of the brush strokes, and that did work better. We're starting to get somewhere. And then I thought, you know what, the technique I used on the loading dock itself, like I'm trying to use other people's techniques here and just experiment, and I just ended up going back to my own technique. So this is exactly how I showed the loading dock. and I think I'm just going to do it this way. So I guess if it's not broke, don't fix it. Not to say there's anything wrong with these other techniques. They just didn't work for me. So this is exactly how I showed the loading dock, where I used, again, the sandstone, a base coat, then another coat where I stippled it on, and then a series of washes with, raw umber, medium gray, and a little bit of black, especially in the middle, in the cracks and stuff. Not very much black, really. It was more of the other two. And then just came in with those same pigments I used before. Mostly in the cracks, I used these two. So that's natural umber and some dark slate gray. This one's kind of a brownish color, and this one's more of a dark gray, almost to black. And I just kind of worked that into the cracks unevenly, intentionally, just to give it some variation. And that's it. That's all it is. So I think I'm going to go with that technique, at least in terms of the painting. And I did burnish this as well with the concrete. I liked what that did. Made it a little bit less rough, which works better in HO scale. All right, so because of the irregular shape of the area I want the concrete pad, I'm going to make the little pieces separately rather than try to carve it into a sheet. So that's what I'm showing here. My friend brought his Proxon over, let me use it for an evening. And I started by cutting essentially a square-sided rectangle, where I just cut it as wide as the thickness of the board. And then I just started cutting thin sections off the end. There you can see them in the container. And I will make the lot out of those squares. I'll just lay them on mosaic style and then paint it from there. So I did decide to make a little ramp to work for the lot to work its way up to almost the elevation of that gate there. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just working off a scrap sheet of foam, making some marks on there, kind of where I want things to be, and get it to fit into the scene better. So what we're doing is creating an incline from left to right. So I'm just taking that block of foam and working a little with the rasp here to add a gentle incline up to the higher level. It's probably only a rise of about I don't know, 1/3 to 1/2 of an inch. And with the ramp glued in place, we'll just use a little bit of putty here, joint compound, and smooth that transition a little more. Get it a little thinner than you can actually sand with the foam. So I think the only real tricky part with the mosaic was just getting that first piece in, getting it exactly how we wanted it. Doing that real carefully, just very, very carefully brushing in some Aleene's tacky glue here, right up against the loading dock, and that'll get the first piece of each row set in place. And then once we do that, it went much quicker, just working left to right, making as straight of a line as I could. And with all the squares glued down, it's time to burnish the surface with some cardboard, just like we did in the sample piece. So we'll use the chalk paint, the sandstone color again. That'll be our first coat. We'll just brush that on normal. And then once that dries, we'll come back with a second coat, same paint, but we'll stipple it on the second time to provide a little texture. And with the stippled on paint dry, it's now the next day here. We've got a little thin wash of medium gray. I'm putting that on almost as a little bit of a filter to manipulate that base color to a little bit more of a grayish hue. So once the gray wash dried, I have now switched to a 1-inch brush, which fits nicely over top of the 1-inch squares here. And now we're using raw umber. And I'm actually going to do this twice. So once all the washes had dried, I got some Vallejo pigments out, and here I'm using a little bit of light gray, some natural umber, and some dark slate gray in that order, just to highlight some cracks. I kind of lay it on, start with the lighter colors in a bigger area, then I come in maybe about half the size of the area with the natural umber, and then I come in with the darker gray and just pick up the deeper cracks there. And then I like to use a makeup brush to kind of smooth things out, get rid of the excess and stuff. It helps blend things in. So there's the light gray going on again. You can see it hit a couple cracks. Then I'll come in with the umber, and then lastly the darker gray. There I accidentally put a little spot of dark gray there. Back to the umber. Get that in, not quite the same size of the area that I used the light gray in, and then the dark in even less of the area. And then I'll smooth it over with the makeup brush. All right, and so I think I mentioned before I was going to use these wooden fence. Well, they're plastic, but they're meant to represent a wooden fence kind of behind the parking lot to kind of hide the bottom of the backdrop. And so what I did was I super glued these toothpicks on there, kind of cut them short, super glued it on there. And I also used a wire brush to scratch some vertical texture into that fence. And so that was the prep on these, and I'm gonna go ahead and get these painted up and also put on the layout. All right, so starting out with just some Tamiya medium gray here. Very thin down layer going on here. Thin down with isopropyl alcohol just as a primer and base color. To this we'll add various layers of the buffs and the dark earths and the deck wood and light deck wood, and just building up again using very thin down paint, just some layers to give the wood some variation. hoping to tie things together a little bit better, bring out some of the dirtiness and tie in with the concrete. This is just a wash, real thin down raw umber going on over top of the airbrush work.